new books, 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 books. Hello, my reading friends. I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader, and I have a book haul video today because I have this problem, and I don't know if this happens to you, but so I have this thing. So, you know, I've been making all these lists of books that I want to read that are nominated for these prizes, and so I've spent a lot of time meticulously working out my TBR, and so I've planned all the books I want to read, and I'm really excited to get to them, and then I'm just like, no, I'm going to read this other book. Like, why am I doing that? That's so ridiculous. But part of the problem is I've been being sent all these really interesting looking new books that are being published in March in the UK for the first time. And they all look really exciting. I have 21 books here to talk about, and these are just the ones that I've been sent that I think sound really interesting. So you see my problem, you see my dilemma. So I'm gonna go through them all briefly, just give quick summaries of them and why I'm so interested in reading them. And you know that feeling where you pick up a book that you've never heard of, that you just see fresh, and you think like, yeah, I want to read this, and just plunge into it and start reading it. And that's what I want to do with a lot of these books. So I would love it if you could help me. After I go through all these books, if you could let me know in the comments below what book out of this big huge pile you would pick to just start reading, to just go right into and not even hesitate. So I'm going to start with a couple of classics that have been reprinted, because I'm all about the classics lately. And I'm going to start with this beautiful new edition of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, 80th anniversary edition published by Virago. And it's a bit difficult to show because it's so white, but it has this beautiful, like, embroidered sort of a cover design. And it has a new introduction by Sarah Perry, who wrote The Essex Serpent. And I have never read this novel. I keep meaning to, and I've seen the movie, and I know that's not the same thing, and I think it is a brilliant movie, and so I do really want to read the book as well. Then there is 1,000 Acres by Jane Smiley. I think this was first published 25 years ago, and now it's published in this Everyman Library edition. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's Jane Smiley's fictional retelling of King Lear, but set in America. And I've never read it, and I've never read any Jane Smiley, which is really bad. I know she published, I think, a big trilogy of novel, or maybe there were 4 books in the series recently, which were really well regarded, but I just didn't get to reading. And so I really want to read this. Then there is Asymmetry by Lisa Halliday. This is her debut novel, which has been talked about a lot because it portrays an affair between a very young woman and a much older male writer. And Lisa Halliday actually had an affair with Philip Roth. So the older writer in this novel, of course, is a thinly veiled portrait of that, though apparently, like, the affair and the action of it, she says, is very different from what actually happened. But I think beyond that sensational aspect to the story, this is supposed to be a really good novel that I've heard high praise from. Rakesh Satayal, who's a writer I really love, has been praising it endlessly on Twitter and Instagram. And there's a quote on the cover from Chad Harbach, who wrote The Art of Fielding, which is a really beautiful novel. The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. This is the novel that Anna James predicted was going to be on the Women's Prize long list. Didn't make the long list, but she was praising this novel endlessly, and I think it sounds really good, so I'm very intrigued and interested to read it. The story of 4 siblings, I think, who as children are told by a fortune teller the date that they're going to die, and that sort of asks the question of, does that change how they actually live their lives? The End of Loneliness by Benedict Wells. This is another sibling story about 3 siblings, I think, whose parents die in a car crash when they're still young. And so then it follows their separate lives and their divergent lives as they try to live and grow beyond this tragedy. Arkady by Patrick Langley. This is a debut novel about 2 brothers who live in a sort of on the fringes of this urban sprawl. And it's about a growing anti-government movement within the city and how the brothers become involved in that. And this is really interesting because it's published by Fitzcarraldo Editions, and their trademark beautiful blue covers. But it's a debut novel written in English, and usually they only publish translated literature, so it's quite a new thing for them to be publishing debut authors. Sal by Mick Kitson. This sounds like a really harrowing story about a young woman who learns all these survivalist skills to go out and live in the wilderness and take her younger sister with her, because I think she's escaping some form of abuse. It has a quote on the cover from Joanna Cannon, who wrote 3 Things About Elsie, which is on the Women's Prize long list, and she calls this a breath of fresh air in a book. Mayhem and Death by Helen McClory. This is a book of short stories by a really interesting young Scottish writer. She's published a few books now, and this is a book of mostly flash fiction, of fiction that only takes place over like a page or 2 pages or 3 pages. And for a while I was really interested and excited in flash fiction because, it's a really disciplined, difficult form to take to try to form a whole full story in just a short amount of time. Is a really big challenge, but it also includes a novella. So these are described as descriptively mythical yet recognizable stories woven from dark and light, human fear and fortune. Mothers by Chris Power. This is a debut book of short stories, and it comes adorned with quotes from really respected literary writers like Yi-Yun Lee and John McGregor and Colin Barrett. It's described as a book peopled by men and women who find themselves at crossroads or dead ends, characters who search without knowing what they seek. Speak No Evil by Uzodinma Iweala. This is by the same author of Beasts of No Nations. I first heard about this book through Sean the Book Maniac on his BookTube channel, and it sounded so good. I was just like, I need to get a copy of this. So this is about a young man living in America who has Nigerian parents, very traditional parents, and he is gay, and when his father discovers that he is gay, the outcome isn't good. And so it follows his journey with his best friend. Sounds like a really powerful queer story that I'm eager to get to. Murmur by Will Eaves. This takes as its inspiration the story of Alan Turing, who is the famous war hero during World War II that helped end the war, but then later on he was condemned and chemically castrated by the British government because he was caught cruising and was found out to be gay. And Will Eaves is a really interesting writer. I read his previous book called The Inevitable Gift Shop, which was this strange combination of poetry and memoir and fiction. And so as well as being an interesting story, I'm sure it's written in a really exciting new way. The Book of Chocolate Saints by Jeet, Theyil. And just look at this beautiful cover. It's very shiny and cool. This is an author that was previously shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. It's the story of a writer from America, I think, who travels to New Delhi for a conference and just gets mixed up with the society there. How I Lose You by Kate McNaughton. This is the story of a young woman who I think is only 31, who wakes up one morning to find that her husband has died by her side. And it's the story about her sort of going back and discovering more about his life that she didn't know. Sounds like a really heartrending story. The Madonna of the Mountains by Elise Valmordia. This is the story of a young Italian woman in the 1920s, I think, in Italy, and her father sets out to try to find her a husband. And she sat at home embroidering this sheet to go with her dowry. And it's the story of the rise of fascism in Italy and how this woman and her family try to protect themselves against that. Tangerine by Christine Mangan. This book is getting a lot of hype because I think it's going to be made into a film shortly, and I was quite excited because it has a quote on the cover from Joyce Carol Oates, and it makes sort of sense that she would quote it because I think it's sort of like a literary psychological thriller, and Joyce is really prone to psychological thrillers. She's written several herself under pseudonyms. And this is the story of a young married couple who moved to Morocco, and the wife meets there an old college roommate who she was used to be really close to but then became estranged from. And it's about a mystery that goes on from there. The Eight Mountains by Paolo Cognetti. This is the story of a friendship of two men, and it follows their friendship over a few decades as they meet every summer in the Alps Alps. And they come from very different backgrounds and lead very different lives, but it's about their connection. And I'm really interested in a story about male friendship, because you don't get that many stories, I think, about like long-term male friendships. The Killing of Butterfly Joe by Rhidian Brook. This is a novel about a man who wants to discover America, and so he sets out on this road trip across America, and while he's doing that he meets a butterfly salesman, and it's about the mystery of that man's life. It's described as part existential road trip, part neo-gothic thriller, and part morality tale. The Long Forgotten by David Whitehouse. Beautiful cover alert! This is the story of someone who finds the black box flight recorder from a plane that crashed 30 years ago, and then listening to this recording, this person's psychology gets sort of melded with one of the people that crashed on the plane. Sounds like a really intriguing story about present-day London. Trick by Domenico Starnone. This is a novel that is Italian and was translated by Jhumpa Lahiri and has an introduction by her. She also translated a book of his that was published last year called Ties, which I kept meaning to read, but I didn't get to. So Trick is the story of a very old man and this time he spends with a very young man who's not even a man, who's a boy, who's only 4 years old, I think. And so this meeting between these very different generations. Oh, my stomach just growled. I think I need to go get a crumpet soon. So the next novel is Too Estoril by Dejan Tiago-Stankovic. This is a novel that I think is a debut novel. It's a very big, long book set in Lisbon during World War II when the country was neutral. There was a lot of tension about whether Germany would come and invade. And it's set in a big, fancy hotel and shows this cross-section of characters, some of whom are real historical figures and some fictional characters. Sounds like a really exciting and interesting take on the war. And finally, I have something very different. Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is a novel which is beginning a lot of hype. It's a young adult fantasy novel, and of course I don't read very much of that, but you know, this has been sort of praised as kind of the new Harry Potter that actually includes a multiracial cast of characters. And you know, I really fancy the idea of getting caught up in a big, long, epic fantasy novel. And this is a story that carries into it tales from African history and mythology into the dilemmas of modern-day America, but puts it in a fictional, fantastical setting. So those are all the novels I have that I really want to get to, in addition to all these other lists of books that I've made. Let me know in the comments below what books out of all of these great, interesting sounding ones you think sound really good, and which one you would pick to read first. So I'm gonna go get myself a crumpet now and a cup of tea. I hope you're all doing well and have a wonderful day and you're reading good things. Thank you for watching, and I will speak to you all again very, very, very soon.